Hey there, innovation champions. Melissa Dinwiddie here. This had better be amazing. Don't disappoint anybody. That was the voice inside my own head when I was a professional artist for years. Now, not ironically, when I was working on a piece for a client, but in those rare moments when I allowed myself to focus on creating for myself. My standards were so ridiculously high that I didn't allow room to be human. There was no compassion. There was the opposite of that. I was the opposite of supportive and nurturing to myself. And guess what happened? Nothing. That's what. Literally, I made nothing for years unless I was on a deadline for a client. And this pattern kept me in a perpetual state of creative drought. Now, I had plenty of ideas, but the internal pressure to make them perfect kept me from even starting. Does that sound familiar? What's fascinating is that the same pattern affects organizations. This pressure to be perfect that I experienced individually, it plays out at the team level when leaders, often unknowingly, create environments where innovation is stifled by impossible expectations. Now, when I work with teams now, I often see how leadership styles directly impact creative output. High pressure environments where mistakes are criticized tend to produce safer, less innovative ideas because people naturally protect themselves by only sharing fully formed concepts that are unlikely to be rejected. It's just human nature. And this mirrors exactly what happened in my own creative practice. When my inner critic was too harsh, my creative output just plummeted. And my own breakthrough came when I developed the very first guidepost in my Creative Sandbox Way, which is now a book. You can see right there behind me. And that first guidepost was, there is no wrong. And this very simple principle changed everything for me. By giving myself permission to create without judgment, I unlocked a flow of ideas that had just been dammed up for years. And the same transformation happens in organizations that adopt a much more nurturing approach to leadership. When teams feel psychologically safe to share early stage ideas without fear of criticism, guess what? Innovation flourishes. Now, this is not just my personal experience. It is backed by solid research. Google's Project Aristotle, which was a comprehensive study of team effectiveness, found that psychological safety was the most important factor in high-performing teams. According to research, psychological safety, which is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas or questions or concerns, it's the foundation of innovation in organizations. So let me break this down using my Create the Impossible framework. If you have been following me at all, you know that my framework has 3 steps, which sound deceptively simple. So let's go through them one by one. The first element of my framework is play hard. This is creating spaces where exploration and experimentation are encouraged without immediate judgment. In my Creative Sandbox retreats, which I run every year, I have witnessed how quickly people open up creatively when they're simply given explicit permission to play. And the same principles apply in organizational settings. When leaders create safe spaces for exploration, team members feel free to pursue unconventional ideas. So this could take a lot of different forms. It might look like scheduling regular time for experimental thinking. It might look like creating physical or virtual spaces that are dedicated to exploration. That's all you do in those spaces. Or it might look like encouraging cross-functional collaboration with no predefined outcomes. Now, of course, it could look like a combination of all of these. Ideally, that's what I would recommend. The second element of my Create the Impossible framework is make crap. In other words, giving permission to create imperfect first attempts without fear of judgment. This is critical. And this principle completely transformed my own creative practice. When I finally embraced the idea that we need the crap to fertilize the good stuff, guess what? My productivity soared. And the same applies to teams. When early, messy ideas are welcomed rather than criticized, innovation accelerates. Now, in my workshops, I often have participants create what I call crappy doodles. And these are intentionally bad drawings. I don't even call them drawings because that word intimidates people so much. That's why I call them crappy doodles. And doing that activity of making crappy doodles that are intentionally bad helps break down perfectionism. And the laughter and relief that follows this exercise shows how powerful it is to explicitly give permission for imperfection. So that's step 2, make crap. The third element of my Create the Impossible framework is learn fast. In other words, creating feedback loops that extract value from every experience, especially seeming failures. Now, in my own creative journey, I learned to see each failed piece as a stepping stone rather than a dead end, which is how I had been seeing them all before. Each attempt taught me something valuable that informed future work. Nurturing leaders create the same mindset in their teams by focusing on learning rather than on blame when things don't go as planned, because that's always going to happen. Things are not going to go as planned. So, how can you become a more nurturing leader who creates conditions for breakthrough innovation? Here are 3 practical strategies from my work with teams. First, shift your response pattern. When someone shares an early stage idea, consciously pause before responding. Instead of immediately jumping to point out potential problems, which is, so easy for us to do, especially if we're gatekeepers, pause and ask questions that could help develop the idea further. What excites you most about this concept? What would make this even better? Even where did this inspiration where did this inspiration come from? Tell me more. This simple shift, which I realize can be very challenging for a lot of us, but it's just a simple shift in mindset that can take a lot of practice. What it does is it signals that you value the creative process, not just the polished outcomes. So important if what we're going for is innovation in our organizations. Second of all, create safe spaces for imperfection. Now, in my Creative Sandbox retreats, I establish clear guidelines that creates psychological safety. And you can do the same by designating specific times, places, or platforms where early, messy ideas are not just permitted, but actively celebrated. The key here is clarity. Be explicit about when and where critique is suspended so team members know when it's safe to share incomplete thinking. So important. Third, model vulnerability through your own creative process. Vulnerability is actually a superpower. In my workshops, I always demonstrate my own creative process, including the messy parts. That can be really scary. But this vulnerability creates permissions for others to be vulnerable too. You can't expect others to be vulnerable if you're not willing to do the same. And leaders can do the same by sharing their own works in progress, being open about creative challenges, and demonstrating that even leaders have messy first drafts. Of course, we all do. So, what's most powerful about nurturing leadership is how it spreads throughout an organization. When leaders model supportive responses to creativity, guess what? Team members start doing the same for each other. This is what I've observed in my workshops and retreats and in the teams that I myself have led. Once one person starts sharing vulnerability, others follow. And before long, a culture of collaborative development emerges where ideas are given room to grow and evolve and sometimes transform into breakthrough innovation. The same transformation happened in my own creative journey when I finally learned to be gentler with myself, to create safe spaces for my own really messy first attempts. The floodgates opened, the creative drought ended, and ideas finally began flowing again. This kind of nurturing environment doesn't lower standards, it raises possibilities. By creating conditions where people feel safe to explore and experiment and, yeah, sometimes fail, you're actually increasing the likelihood of breakthrough innovation. So, your challenge this week is to try a simple experiment. I invite you to, next time someone brings you an idea, respond first with curiosity rather than critique. Ask a follow-up question that helps them develop their thinking further instead of immediately pointing out potential issues. And notice what happens to their energy, their openness, and ultimately the quality of their ideas. You might be surprised at how this really small shift in your leadership approach can spark new creative possibilities. Remember, innovation doesn't thrive under pressure for perfection. It flourishes in environments where exploration is encouraged and imperfection is welcomed and learning is celebrated. Ready to create a more nurturing environment that drives breakthrough innovation in your team or organization? Click the link in the description to book a complimentary innovation strategy session. Let's explore how the Create the Impossible framework can help you transform your leadership approach to unlock unprecedented creativity and innovation on your team. If you found these insights about nurturing leadership valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of innovation champions. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a new strategy for driving creativity and innovation in your work. And I would love to know your thoughts on this topic. Have you experienced both nurturing and demanding leadership styles? And which did you find led to more innovation and creativity? Or maybe you found value in a blend of both approaches. Share your insights in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay playful, and keep creating the impossible. See you next time. Ciao.